Welcome to Construction Cashflow. I'm your host, Stu Davidson, and if you haven't already done so, hit the subscribe button so you never miss an episode.
For anybody that's unfortunately currently got a job from hell and is possibly about to go into the situation where they're engaging claims consultants and QSs and claims lawyers, then it would be absolutely a dream for them to have this information in this format. It's very, very simple. It operates on people's phones, but just by implementing it, the additional benefits to a business are enormous. One of the things that I've been working on with the latest tool that I've developed is capturing exactly what has been installed, and as soon as it's done, record it. So what's happened? What's the cause? What's the effect? Payment. If you're going to create this underlying profit, you've got to recover all the monies that are due to you on the contract.
In this show, we ask our guests to tell us their story, tell us a little bit about their background, how they got to where they are today, how they develop their product, their services, their ideas, and we discuss how that can affect construction cash flow and other areas of construction, and also to give us an idea of how we might make things better and give you a few tips and ideas to take away with you. And listen to the end where you'll find out more about them, more about our guests, about what motivates them, what inspires them, and hopefully that'll inspire you too. And always, don't forget to hit the subscribe button so you don't miss another episode. In this episode, it's a real pleasure to introduce you to Peter Searle. Peter is one of the most experienced professionals in the industry. He was Regional Director for Kiers for 10 years. He set up the Constructing Excellence Kent Club and was also a judge for the Construction Manager of the Year Award for projects of over 100 million. He's now the chair of the Professional Membership Review Panel for the CIOB and has his own professional management consultancy business. I know you're going to love Peter's story and the work he does still in the industry. There's lots of tips and advice here in this episode that I'm sure you're going to love, and also what motivates and inspires him. So without further ado, I'd love to introduce you to Peter Searle. Hi Peter, how are you today?
Yeah, I'm fine, thanks, Stuart. Doing well, thank you.
It's great to have you on the podcast. Real privilege to have you here. I'll start really by asking you about your story. So tell us about yourself, your story, and how you got to where you are now.
Well, it is very, very, very indulgent, isn't it? Being able to talk about yourself is. I'm most flattered to have been asked. I suppose it goes back to when you leave school. These influence how things go in your life, and it's quite strange that when I was doing my A levels, I was actually quite interested in computing, but back in those days, it was all punch cards. And when the degree courses were coming up as to what you could study, I saw computing and I thought, I can't see myself punching cards for the rest of my life. So I ended up doing civil engineering. And I chose to go to a polytechnic that was away from home. And I did a thick sandwich year, as they were called in those days, where you did a year in industry, which was actually really beneficial because setting out on the sites, you really got under the skin of everything that was really going on and really understood all the problems that the trades had. So I did that for a year with RM Douglas up in the Midlands, and then when I finished my degree, I joined French Kia as it was then. The business was a lot smaller than what it is now. I think there was about 400 engineers in the business, and they sent me to the Isle of Man for my first job. So I spent the first 4 years of my career working overseas in the Isle of Man, if you call that overseas, and then in Africa, building airports, which was absolutely fascinating because you were sort of building something really iconic that was going to help the countries go forward. In fact, one of the surveyors that I worked with, he flew into Lesotho on one of these friendship planes, sort of like a Land Rover with wings on the top. And we built the airport, and he actually flew out on a jumbo. So,
wow.
Yeah, some great days. But after that, I came back to the UK. I did some work in the design office because I was heading for doing getting chartered as a civil. But as usual, outside influences came along, and there was a recession, and I ended up moving into working on buildings in the southeast. So I started, all the usual sorts of things: section manager, site manager, working my way up to project manager, and gained my MCIOB whilst that was going on. And one of those buildings, I thought was going to be one of these iconic statements that was going to be there forever and a day. Courthouse in Haywards Heath. It was sort of built in the late 80s, and that was unfortunately knocked down. I think about 2015. So these buildings that you think, like the old Victorian buildings, the prestigious civic buildings that you think are going to be there forever and a day, life just keeps moving on. But being involved with lots and lots of jobs, and got that great satisfaction of being able to go around and say, like a lot of builders do, I built that, I was on that job, and so on and so forth. I think at that time, the late 80s, Kia had sort of, or French Kia as it was then, was going through quite a evolution. There was the buyouts with Beazer and Hanson, and the chief exec at the time, Colin Busby, eventually engineered the management buyout. He was a fantastic people person, and he actually explained everything that was going on in the business as we went through the management buyout. And I really got a kick out of understanding the business strategy. And it ties in really nicely with what you're about, because what Colin identified was that contractors actually should be big cash generators. They don't necessarily make a lot of profit, but they generate cash. And it's what you do with that cash that actually can transform a business.
Exactly.
And his model that he worked with was that the contracting business generated the cash. The cash was then invested into property or property development, and that's where you saw profits come from. And those profits were sufficiently large that it enables you to bid large FM type contracts, and that gave you then a much longer foresight into the future as to what income and turnover you might have. So it was a very nice closed circle. And he also used the cash that was in the construction businesses actually to help leverage the buyout. So an understanding of business strategy and what you can do with the cash, it was sort of really captured my excitement at that time. And from that, that was always in the back of my mind. So then I moved on to, as you do, you move up you're on the operational side. I moved into managing a lot of Tesco development work. So we'd had, Egan, Latham and just about Egan at that time partnering, and all that was all the rage. Tesco's were a real taskmaster, but we learned a hell of a lot from them in terms of efficiency and how jobs should be run and managing costs and all of that sort of thing. And there was a lot of collaboration between the main contractors on developing the types of stores that they wanted. and some fantastic friendships were built up out of that, and I'm still on some committees with people from other organisations from those days, going forward. So so with the work that I was doing from them, I gained my FCIOB at that time, and I decided to study an MBA because of the interest that had come along, triggered by the buyout, I suppose. That period came to the end. It was some movement, people retiring, health issues and what have you, and there was an opportunity. I became the area director for Kent for Kia in 2005. So the Tesco work faded away. All that turnover needed backfilling. So as the director, I was, out there drumming up for business, and we ended up through the national frameworks actually doing a lot of public sector work, building schools for the future, prisons, all sorts of things. But I really did understand the importance then of networks, external networks, to bring in ideas and to move forward, and sort of things that I did as a director. I set up Constructing Excellence, the Kent Club, which is 10 years old now, up and running. I became a judge for the Construction Manager of the Year awards. Did that on and off over a period of time. I think the most spectacular year I had for that was 2013, where at that time they still did the categories by value, and it was the first time that they'd had sufficient entries of jobs over 100 million, and I chaired the category to judge the over 100 million.
Wow, amazing.
So, yeah, it was incredible.
Isn't it?
Got to see, behind the Olympic Stadium, the Aquatic Centre, a massive bank refurbishment in London, a PFI hospital up in the north, and another scheme, a mixed development in London, which ultimately won, which was amazing. And then off the back of interviewing for Construction Manager of the Year award, I started doing interviews for the CIOB, for the professional membership, and in fact last November I became the chair of the professional membership review panel. So is another external influence. So as I say, I was a director of Kia's for 10 years. 2015, by that time, Colin and another couple of CEOs had gone through, and there was a CEO there that was had a different strategy, let's say, looking for doubling turnover, and I didn't think it was right for me, so I actually left at that time. I was able to leave, and I set up a management consultancy, basically that I was going to do was I was hoping to help small businesses with their business strategies. But as it's evolved over the last 6 or 7 years, there's one or two reoccurring themes have occurred, which I've focused on. And the other thing that's happened is that I've gravitated back to just working with construction businesses, because it is the most exciting sector out there.
It is. It's such a diverse industry. There is so much, and we're always learning, and it's great to have you on because of the background that you've had, the range of projects you've worked on, the different structures, the different structures of the businesses, and particularly Kia has grown under your leadership, grew into new areas.
That's
and
right.
it's really led the way in terms of how we how we work more safely, how we look at how cash flows, and that's a real interest to me, you know,
It
what you're
is.
saying about the generation of cash, you know, because I honestly believe that the more cash flows, the more wealth grows, and that's for
Yeah.
everybody. We just seem to have a situation quite often where some of that cash gets blocked. You know, there isn't that cyclical nature, that wanting to move it quickly, and people seem to be nervous about moving the cash in case they get something wrong, or we haven't got the systems in place. So really it's around, how do we give people confidence, you know, from the developer, the main contractor, and through the supply chain subcontractors? How do we give them confidence that they can move the cash a lot quicker, because there's so many processes involved, isn't there?
Yeah, the number of processes is an obstacle, but I think that the real big difference between construction and any other sector is that in the middle of it all, you've got this profession called quantity surveyors. I've got nothing against them, but because projects don't move forward in complete sections at a time, then you have to do this remeasurement process, and there's always a debate about what the remeasurement is and what's in and what's not and what was in the original contract. So this bit of debate in the middle needs looking at to help how it goes forward. Now, one of the frameworks I worked on, that was done based on milestone payments all the time. Albeit the milestone payments, we broke them down to quite small milestones, but they worked because you say, you know, so long as you got 95% of it achieved, you'd never have 100% of anything achieved until it all comes together at the end. But so long as you got 95% of it achieved, then you were paid, and that helped move the cash forward. So setting up milestone payments for everything, and in reality, the residential sector works a little bit like this with the card system. You know, the carpenters go in, you know, they do the skirtings and the door frames or whatever. They get a card for a plot and they get paid, or they should get paid. You know, and that moves the cash quickly because it's tangible. Now, what happens, and I'm dealing with 2 or 3 people at the moment, is yes, the electricians or the carpenters go in, they finish a plot, but then unless it's all signed off there and then, and you know the payments start to trigger, something else happens, and the work is maybe not messed up, but you know there's a defect or something occurs because of the next trade that's following on, and then there's a debate, and then the money slows down. So one of the things that I've been working on with this the latest tool that I've developed is capturing exactly what has been installed, and as soon as it's done, record it, so there's no debate. You know, and that's just eliminates the argument. And then the other thing is to look at things like, you know, the plan to do the work. Everything should have gone through smoothly, but something else happens. So what's happened? What's the cause? What's the effect? Payment. And I think in actual fact, you know, the NEC contract, because it requires notices to be given and brought to the surface quickly because you're time barred if you don't, it actually starts to engender this quicker turnaround of cash. It really does.
It kind of goes along with something that I've been working on and looking at for a while, is the concept of micro milestones. And that's exactly what you're talking about, isn't it? The micro milestones. And almost, if we to put it kind of in colloquial terms, it's like can we do a good day's work for a good day's pay? Are we able to assess the project at the end of each day?
Well, I on a domestic or not a domestic job, but on a residential job, I don't see why not. You know, how long does it take to put the skirtings and the frames up in a house, or paint it? You know, you can get through the rooms quite quickly if it's broken down to that level, that granularity.
Yeah.
Becomes a bit more difficult with, say, cabling in a hospital or medical gases in a hospital. But yeah.
But again, I think it's possible, with the technology we have today, where you can align a 3D digital photo on site with the BIM model.
Yeah.
And how far it's got.
Yeah. But I think BIM is fantastic going forward, with every object tracked in every for everything, time, weight, carbon, everything. But unfortunately, 95% of businesses in the UK are less than 10 people, and a lot of them aren't using BIM. They're not much past using paper or WhatsApp, and trying to get some structure into what they do, the contractors, is a big obstacle.
Yeah, that is a challenge. Yeah, definitely a challenge. And we're talking about tradesmen, the carpenter putting skirting in, etc., or the plumber putting in pipes here, there, and what it's like. Sometimes you need to actually show them the drawing, because they'll say, well, that's not the way we normally do it, but that's what is on the drawing. Let alone BIM. So it's actually getting something that works for everybody, but achieves what the project wants, what the quality and the making sure that what's installed is what's on the drawings, but something that everybody could use. Like you've got to have the carpenter or the bricklayer, maybe he needs to use it on an app, has to have something that he'll use on his phone to make it work.
Yeah, I mean, the other example is I find with the smaller businesses, because especially the newer one, the younger businesses, they're so keen to get work that they will sign up to people that sign up to jobs that where the main contractor or the client is probably not a serial procurer and not experienced, or they don't bring in the right teams around them. And you can find the jobs can get out of sync very quickly. And for businesses, for any of the trades to go in, they need a clear run at what they're meant to be doing. And if it's not there, then it's a disruption cost is generally incurred as they work around it. And all of these disruption costs, unless they're claimed for in some sort of way, start to hit the underlying profit, and if the underlying profit deteriorates, then you've got no chance with cash.
Absolutely.
Underlying profit has got to be there to get the cash flowing.
What do you think the key things we could do actually to keep that moving, to protect the underlying profit? Is there
on site, it is down to site organisation and pre-planning, so that everything happens to a plan in the order expected. And it also it's a gut feeling really, this, but from experience, if you've got a regular supply chain, you tend to have a number of subcontractors on the job that generally work with you and know how you work, and they tend to work with each other. And what you can find is that if you're under the cosh and you have to go out to the wider market to get a lower price, if you've got more than 3 or 4 subcontractors on a job that you don't regularly work with, it can very easily get out of hand. So understanding the supply chain and how they work, and working with them regularly, and introducing just 1 or 2 per new ones per site is the way to go forward. You want to build teams that work together regularly, and this was the great thing about the Tesco program. I did about 40 stores, extensions and new builds and what have you, and there was 3 or 4 three electricians, three refrigeration, whatever. Each of the trades were named by Tesco's as to who they would be, and I could go into the meeting and I just knew the trades, but the combinations of who was sat in front of me each time was different, but we all worked the same way.
Yeah.
And it just used to motor. It really did.
It makes sense. I mean, it's almost like a football team. If you keep chopping and changing the defence or the attack or the players, then they're always going to be learning from scratch on each game. But if you keep the same, they eventually start to really deliver, don't they? There's That's a synergy that takes place, isn't there?
Yeah. There's a good old business model about that, isn't there? The storming, norming, forming. And, but unfortunately, with building projects, everyone seems to be like a storming. You start from scratch. You've got to get some consistency with the supply chain, with the client frameworks and that thing, and then you actually get performing.
Yeah, absolutely. How do we actually get that consistency with supply chains?
Supply chains, you do have to have a proper review with them, and it's got to be taken seriously. The Tesco process, which I think cascaded out to many of the contractors that were working on there, and then subsequently elsewhere, was we used to have to do a scoring every fortnight of our own performance. So it was a self-assessment, and as you probably know, everybody that does a self-assessment generally underscores themselves. They always say they're doing worse than what they are. So there's always room for improvement. So you did a self-assessment every fortnight with the project manager you were working with, and then at the end of the year, there was an intermediate one, half year, but there was also an end of year review. What they used to do was they used to anonymize all the scores and benchmark you on 10 factors. And this benchmarking, you could see immediately how you compared to the other contractors. So if you were dipping down on snagging, you immediately saw where you were in relation to the average. And if that jeopardized you staying on the supply chain, then you started to address it. So it was an education process as well, because people they used to have sharing knowledge days, as it was called. All the contractors would go in, and somebody that had got a very high score on one of the benchmarks would give a presentation on how they got that high score. So sharing knowledge was one of the ways forwards. Yeah,
fantastic. I think there's a place for maybe looking at how contractors and clients look at a project, because I think, as you say, the supply chain is worth its weight in gold. And maybe the answer is to have the contractor being the supply chain, the kind of the guardian or the custodian of the supply chain, the person that gathers the supply chain, builds the supply chain. Necessary. They like to keep their supply chains to themselves. But I kind of, from a QS perspective, I often quite see the supply chain. If I'm responsible for the budget, quite often, we employ the contractor, and then the supply chain is the other side of the fence or the wall, and I don't really see what's going on. And it's nice to get a bit more transparency. But I've kind of often toyed around with the idea of, well, can't we pay the contractor to bring? This is part of my idea around cash coming from a central source. The contractor on all the hands, not handling the cash, just issuing promise to pay and the certification and the approvals, and then the cash flows to where it's got to go. We could pay the contractor a certain amount of money to bring his supply chain. So it's a benefit to the contractor to say, look, we want to adopt this model. where you don't necessarily handle the cash, but
No,
you bring the supply chain for a fee to the project.
Yeah, I mean, what you're talking about there is almost construction management as opposed to management contracting, and there's a big problem with that for main contractors, because obviously the cash is not going through their books,
Exactly.
and therefore you can't generate the cash. So construction management, where the money flows directly to the trade contractors, is a way round it, but it doesn't. The main contractor is then cut out, and their turnover would decrease because they become a fee-based business.
There may be an accounting exercise might get round that, but then again, that's something to look in for a question for another day, I think.
Yeah, I think you need to get an expert in on project bank accounts. They probably have got a view on that.
I think the project bank accounts were worth exploring. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
and how they're working.
So Peter, I know you've been developing a new app, and it kind of addresses some of the things we've been discussing and some of the challenges we've been discussing. So tell us a bit more about that, about what your project is and how that's going.
Yeah, it's actually going really well now. Over the last 2 years, I've been an expert on the iConstruct panel, doing quite a lot of mentoring for that program. And a reoccurring theme came up with contractors. They were generally, between, say, being established for a couple of years and 5 or 6 years, something like that. And nearly all of them had an experience of a project from hell where it had gone wrong. And yes, they were delivering good quality work. Work opportunities were coming along, but like every new business, they grab whatever they can, and they weren't being selective or aren't selective about who they're working for, and they end up on this project from hell. Now, as you were saying earlier, they're very good tradesmen. They're good at delivering what they're doing, but they're not very commercial. And when I started delving into the back end of the business, I was finding all sorts of different things, that needed addressing. But one of the tipping points really is that ultimately, if you're going to create this underlying profit, you've got to recover all the monies that are due to you on the contract. And a project from hell is where the money is just flowing out all over the place. So it was getting a grip of that. So using my experience over the years and several adjudications and what have you, what I realised was that the key document in all of this is probably the Society of Construction Lawyers Delay and Disruption Protocol, which everybody refers to when you're doing a serious claim, and that just requires cause and effect to be captured. And if you've got the cause and effect, then what you can do is you can backtrack through the logic link program or create a logic link program to identify who is responsible. So getting the records is really difficult, and I always found it difficult, even though in Kears we get site diaries and meeting minutes and there's stacks and stacks of records. But what you really want is on such and such each week or each fortnight, what should have been happening on the logic link program, what was happening. So what we've done is we've developed an app. It's a Power App, so it goes onto the Microsoft system, which most people have got. Microsoft Business goes onto that system, and you capture each fortnight or each month, whatever, the plan versus actual, and we've called it PVA as a result of that, plan versus actual. The information's there to be used for a discussion, if you like. To say, yes, I've got a potential claim here. I could run it through the courts if I wanted to, or adjudication. which might be sufficient to get the money in, or you can go the next step and get an expert like yourself to actually do the analysis and to do a formal claim. So we've built this app, and it's got one or two features in it, apart from the collection of the data, that what we've found as we've introduced it to businesses that have had extra benefits for businesses, and has actually helped them structure themselves ready to scale up. So it's very, very simple. It operates on people's phones, but just by implementing it, the additional benefits to a business are enormous. And it takes a business from being, or a person that's working in the business delivering their trade or occupation. It takes them from that to actually being a business person, because they're beginning to understand the management accounts.
Start to working on their business rather than in the business. Yeah. So who would the app be for, essentially? What would be the range of people that might benefit from it?
What we've done is we've already had people using it. So they've generally been contractors, trade contractors that have been established between 2 years and 5 years. The owner has probably come off the tools. They probably haven't got a QS. They have got an accountant, but the accountant doesn't do anything in regards to project accounts. They only do their financial accounts. And more often than not, the person has decided they need to actually start working on the business to coin a phrase.
So it sounds as if it's not only recording program via actual. It sounds like it's a lot more than that.
Yeah, well, I mean, the first thing that comes out of it is when we speak to businesses about it. The first thing to do is are they actually identifying projects separately in the business? Now, most businesses, early stage businesses in contracting, the accountant's only worried about money coming in and money going out, and they don't actually break it down to projects. And the financial accountant's just not interested. So the first thing that we have to do, if they haven't already got it, is introduce a project coding system. So that's the first thing, and the first button on the phone is just the projects.
That's amazing, Peter, because one of the things I talk about is the practice of robbing Peter to pay Paul in the industry, and that would certainly help that reduce that down tremendously.
Yeah, well, most accountants, when people go to an accountant to set your business up, a contractor, they do it for a minimal fee. The accountants do it for a minimal fee because they just want the business as a startup. The people don't really appreciate what an accountant can do, or particularly a management accountant. They don't differentiate between a financial accountant and a management accountant. The financial accountant will say, oh yes, we'll go down the route of a limited company, therefore you can take the money out through dividends, it's low tax, all this is good. But it doesn't help, because you're not putting the costs into the business in the right place. You need a separate set of accounts. So the first benefit is setting up projects, and that's the first button on the phone. The next one, the next thing that we do is we then say to people, right, now you've got the projects, we need to just see what contract you're on. What are the contract conditions? What is the start date? What is the finishing date? What are you contracted to do? Are there LADs? And when I've been looking through the contracts that quite a lot of the subcontractors have got, they've signed up to it's going to be this duration, and we'll give you 2 weeks notice to start. Full stop. LADs are TBA. Well, but this is going on, and and I'm surprised at the size of businesses that are actually issuing contracts like this to subcontractors.
Absolutely. It's interesting because I was on the podcast with Joseph Ewan,
Right.
who has a coaching business and coaches specialist subcontractors around accepting or not accepting
Yeah.
contracts and developing their own terms and conditions.
Yeah.
And the stories he gave me, the contracts that were issued to specialists that were almost unworkable. And quite often, they weren't signed, or even the wording wasn't given to the subby till he turned up on site. And then it's put in front of him. You need to sign that.
That's right. So that, you know, as part of the app, once we've got the projects, all I ask for them is to put in the start date, the finish date, and whether there's LADs. But we start to get a structure.
Yeah.
And it starts people questioning what they're actually signing up to, and if they have already signed up to things, then, you know, I've got, you know, like everybody has, you've got tricks of how you can then start setting the ball rolling of to establish, well, what's going on. So you can do that. The next one is variations. You know, something's happened on the site, you can't work over here because so and so hasn't finished. Go and work over here. So we just do a confirmation of instruction. You know, and the app allows the confirmation of instructions to be there, put in place. These build up the picture, and then there's another one for the handovers. So for like contractors, when they finish the skirtings or the doors or whatever, they just take a picture, and it just fires out an email to, you know, the relevant parties to, in each case, for the CFIs or the handover reports. And then the final one is the plan versus actual. So it's very, very simple. Then once you've got those records in place, you can start to build a business and scale it, because the information's collected on the phones. It goes back into the office, comes straight up on the screen, obviously all tabulated in the correct order, and you can start to do monthly reviews. You know, is this job actually going to achieve that date? If not, are we going to do this? What is the action? Have we actually claimed for this CFI? Why is this one disputed? All the questions that, you know, somebody in my old position would ask, but I'm now getting the contractors to ask that of themselves. And the final benefit, which I hadn't really appreciated until I think it was the third or the fourth company we rolled it out to, was that many businesses, when they start out with sort of like Gmail accounts, and maybe they've got Microsoft 365, a personal account, and they're not using business, they haven't got control of the emails, they might be using a bit of Dropbox. The whole security and GDPR and control of their data, IT wise, is an issue. So before
very important.
So before we put the app onto their system, we obviously have to review what their IT, how their IT set up. And I've got another business partner who will go in and, you know, do the migration so that they're on a clean Microsoft for Business, and can set up the emails. And then as people come and go, it's easy to keep control of the email addresses.
I think that's fascinating, you know, and it's much more than just a construction app. It's a business building app, because I know your background is not only construction, and, you know, I know that you're a business coach as well, and it kind of brings all that together. And I like the idea of reviewing the processes, you know, to scale a business. Of course, if you're bringing on employees, you don't want to have a bit of software over here, a bit of software over there. You want the SOPs to be nice and simple, that you know, that everything's in one place, everything's linked up, everything talks to each other, and then you can give the job description, everyone knows what they're doing, the software is straightforward. So you're not, because I do see in lots of businesses where they're saying, now we're using this CRM over here and we're using that program over there, and we're, you know, and they're putting this one down to pick this one up, you know.
I think there is a place for that, because businesses go at different speeds at different stages. So when the marketing people are out there, they might talk to 100 people
Yeah.
And that whittles down to eventually getting on a tender list of say 4 or 6, whatever, and eventually you end up with one job. So there's a lot of work goes in before a project actually comes to fruition. Now, all of that data that goes around with those 100 leads that you might have looked at is of no interest to anybody on site. So if you've got a CRM system that's totally detached from the rest of the system, I don't believe that that's a problem, because there's so much noise in there. What you're interested in is when it becomes a tender, and therefore you move it from general noise to a tender, and then you use the bespoke estimating software to do the tender properly, because the best tool for the job is a bit of estimating software for estimating.
Yeah, sure.
So you use what's appropriate, the best planning tool, and that sort of thing. There are tools out there that try and do everything from end to end, but they're not actually really good at everything, because nothing's really good at everything unless it's properly developed for it. And then you move on to site, and then there's there are tools out there like Field View and things like that capture all sorts of records, do the site diaries, do the health and safety. But for small businesses, they actually buy in the health and safety properly, and the person that's doing the health and safety will have their own app, so that comes with that. So you use the specialist bit of software. What PVA does is it's just a little bit of glue in the middle that it doesn't have to talk to it. It's all done. It's a verbal review, and you sit there and you just go through it and discuss it, and surface what needs to be done. But it's the little bit of glue in the middle. After a couple of years of using it, a business owner can start to say, well, actually, I need this record, or I need this bit more information, and then they might start to introduce more sophisticated bits of software for the various elements of the business.
But I like the sound that it's simple, because to get people to use it needs to be simple, but it addresses the fundamentals that are not being done, that are causing the problems with the cash flow, causing the problems with the profit, and businesses are going out of business because they probably haven't got anything simple that they can relate to, just to make sure those fundamental things are done.
No, that's right. And that was one of the reasons we went for Power App, because the guys on site just use it on their phone. They don't need anything separate. It's a tool that they're used to working with or have around. Everybody's got one these days. And hopefully we move people off of using things like WhatsApp that are totally unstructured to something that's structured, that ties in with the contract.
How could people find out more about the app and
We've set up a website. I'll give you the whatever they call it. It's the www.pvatracker.co.uk. PVA standing for plan versus actual, but we hope it also sticks in your mind.
Yes, definitely.
It's short. So PVA Tracker is a very concise web page, and people can book a demonstration just by going to that.
And what I'll do is I'll put the link also on the podcast, so if people when they listen to the podcast, they can click the link and then go through to the app and book a demo. The book a demo, and my Hannah, my virtual PA, would just agree a time. We do it over Zoom, because the bane of our lives is that the contractor hasn't kept the records, and then we're spending all our time, they're paying us a fortune for spending a lot of time trying to pick out what actually happened. But if it's already there, it's for us, it's heaven. We will, it's, as you quite often say, it's records, and
that's right.
Also keeping not just records, but the right records at the right time.
Ones.
It makes the whole journey a lot. And as well as I do. You know, if you've been on a complex adjudication, and we're trying to work out cause and effect of something that happened 6 months ago, and the records are not really there, then the barristers are rubbing their hands together, because those grey areas are where the lawyers like to play. They love that. And,
well, I was explaining it to a construction lawyer the other day at a networking event, and he said, "Blimey, I wish I'd thought of that." So, it's people that have been in the situation, or anybody that's unfortunately currently got a job from hell and is possibly about to go into the situation where they're engaging claims consultants and QSs and claims lawyers. Then it would be absolutely a dream for them to have this information in this format.
So if you're listening and you want to avoid the job from hell, then sign up to the app, or at least go to the website and get a demo. It could save you a lot of heartache and help you scale your business, and save the business failing on the basis of the job from hell, or not keeping the right records.
That's right. The profit just flowing away, really.
Yeah. What tips? Quick 3 tips would you give a contractor or subcontractor in terms of avoiding the job from hell?
The 3 tips. First one is review who the client is. Try and find out who they are. The next one is plan the work. Make sure you know what you're signing up to. And then the third one, unfortunately, this one is 3 things, but it's records.
Yeah.
And they've got to be relevant, they've got to be timely, and they've got to be accurate.
Perfect.
I mean, the Irish lawyer that is famed for the quote records has given us a great quote there for everybody.
Absolutely, and it's so spot on. So thank you for that, Peter. Now, have you got time for a quick fire round?
Yes.
Motivational around you and your day and what you do. And so here we go. I'm going to fire these off for you. So the first one, how do you start your day?
As slowly as possible these days.
I like that one. Yeah, most get up and run around the block 5 times, and I like that one. That suits me.
Yeah.
When are you most productive?
Probably in the morning between 9 and 12, I would say.
Morning.
Yeah.
What's something new happening in your life right now?
At the moment, I'm planning my series of holidays for the year. And there's probably actually really a distraction for not doing the garden project that I'm supposed to be working on.
So what does adventure look like for you?
Definitely traveling and going to new places. I love traveling. Yeah.
What would you love to do that might surprise your friends and family?
I think maybe rather bizarrely, possibly do a degree in computing or law or something like that. Or economics. I don't know.
Oh, you've let the cat out the bag now.
I think my wife might kill me if she thought I was going to do some studying like that again.
Yeah. So name a challenge you overcame that possibly changed your life.
It's a tricky one. There's a lot of challenges have occurred, but there is one instance where we were actually on a trekking holiday, going to base camp at Everest, and I think we were just one level below where that the hospital is that brings people down from base camp, and there was a person in the group that was ill, suffering from very bad food poisoning or something, and you've got the altitude sickness and everything. And I can remember we were walking across this the lower part of the glacier, and I was thinking, it doesn't matter how much money you've got in your pocket here, this is life or death. And just keeping going. And this poor woman that was ill was struggling along. seeing how she was getting along, that was a real challenge that day mentally on the mountain.
Amazing. And it brings home what's important in life.
It's health is incredibly important. You see people in business, one or two people go off, they're ill because of whatever, and everything changes. You've got to look after your health.
You have, and it is so important, and in business, and I think we're a community, aren't we, at the end of the day? Whether we're construction or whatever business we're in, a community, and it gets stressful and it gets heated and there's some ups and downs, but at the end of the day we're all human beings. It's all about being kinder to each other if we possibly can.
Definitely.
So what inspires and motivates you?
That's actually changed over the years. Initially, it was I was quite inspired by Isambard Kingdom Brunel as an engineer, and then as business sort of moved on, I thought John Harvey Jones was quite a good character to read about. At the moment, it's a Japanese philosophy called Ikigai. I don't know if you come across it.
I haven't. No.
So there's a very good book on it by a woman called Beth Kempton, and what you do is you take your values, the things you like to do, the things that you're good at, and you try and find what overlaps in the middle. And
sounds interesting.
Yeah, this Japanese philosophy is the Japanese use it for living a long life. And where they've fully adopted this, people are living to 120, 130. It's absolutely amazing. Very interesting.
Peter, what was the name of the book again? Just so that we can...
It's Ikigai. It's spelled Ikigai. And it's by a lady called Beth Kempton. And it's all about the reason for, your reason for being. Having purpose.
It's amazing.
And it does. I've found it obviously changes over the years. I'm very much in this sort of giving back stage at the moment.
That sounds amazing. And do you know what you've inspired me to do on the quick fire round? And I think one of my other guests came up with on this question about a book. And I may include, I think that's really good. What book are you reading now? What's inspiring you? I think that's a really, really good one because it's something we can all go away and have a look at.
That's fantastic.
Thank you for that. So what does success mean to you?
I think finding my Ikigai.
Nice one. And one final question, Peter. What advice would you give your young self?
That's simple. You get a 12-digit password that you can remember that's got hashtags and God knows what in it.
I like that. I'm sure there's a lot of us and all the listeners can relate to that one. Well, thank you, Peter. Thank you for coming on. It's been amazing, and there's so many golden nuggets there. And good luck with the product. I think it's amazing. I think it's something that the industry really needs, and I know you've spent a lot of time developing it. I'll put the link below. Wish you well, Peter. Thank you so much for coming on.
Stuart, it's been a pleasure.
You've been listening to Construction Cashflow. Hit the subscribe button if you haven't already done so you never miss an episode. And remember, the faster cash flows, the faster wealth grows.